I'm Tiffany, 33 years old, and until recently I was married to James. We met at a charity gala 3 years ago. I thought he loved me for who I was. That illusion shattered in Paris at my mother-in-law Eleanor's 60th birthday dinner. When we arrived at the exclusive restaurant, my seat was missing. My husband smirked. Guess we miscounted. I smiled politely and walked away, not knowing I was about to unleash my secret wealth. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated. The day I met James felt like the beginning of something real. I was at a charity fundraiser for children's education, keeping a low profile as usual. Despite being a successful tech entrepreneur, I've always downplayed my wealth. My parents raised me to value character over cash, so I drove a modest car, lived in a comfortable but not flashy home, and never flaunted designer labels. It wasn't about hiding who I was. It was about finding people who appreciated me beyond my bank account. James approached me at the bar, charming in his well-fitted but not ostentatious suit. He introduced himself as a marketing executive, and unlike the finance bros who usually circled me like sharks, he seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts on educational inequality, the cause of the evening. Most people here are just trying to network or get their pictures in the society pages, he said, leaning in conspiratorially. But you look like you actually care about the kids. I was immediately drawn to his apparent authenticity. James had warm hazel eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and he listened attentively to my ideas. By the end of the evening, he had my number and I had butterflies. Our courtship was swift but seemed solid. James was attentive, kind, and refreshingly normal. He didn't show off or name drop. He took me to hole-in-the-wall restaurants with amazing food rather than sceney spots. When I told him about my tech company, I downplayed its success, saying I was doing okay, rather than revealing I'd been featured in Forbes. He seemed impressed by my brain, rather than interested in my bank account, which was exactly what I wanted. 6 months after we met, James proposed during a weekend hike. No photographers or flash mobs, just the two of us on a mountain at sunrise. I said yes, overjoyed to have found someone who seemed to love the real me. We had a small, intimate wedding at a seaside inn. Just 50 guests, mostly my close friends and his family. It was the first time I'd met his people, and while they weren't overtly hostile, I sensed a coolness beneath their polite smiles. His mother Eleanor was an elegant woman with perfectly highlighted hair and a country club membership etched into her demeanor. She hugged me with air kisses and called me dear, with a smile that never reached her eyes. James has told us so little about you, she said. Just that you work in computers or something. Software development, I corrected gently. I own a cybersecurity startup. How fascinating, she replied, clearly uninterested. James always did like those nerdy girls. James's father, Richard, was quieter, following Eleanor's conversational lead like a well-trained dance partner. He asked perfunctory questions about my family and nodded without listening to the answers. James's sister Amanda was the most transparent. Tall, blonde, and aggressively polished, she looked me up and down and commented, "Your dress is so simple. I guess that's your style, huh?" I'd chosen an elegant but understated gown, and her emphasis on simple felt deliberate. Still, I brushed it off. They were going to be my family now, and I was determined to win them over. That determination would last 2 painful years. After the wedding, the pattern of subtle exclusion began. I'd hear about family dinners after they happened. "Oh, Mom just invited the family over last minute," James would explain. It wasn't a big deal. Holiday gatherings became exercises in patience, as Eleanor would seat me away from James at the table, or Amanda would make inside jokes that everyone but me understood. When I tried to contribute to conversations about their family traditions, Eleanor would smoothly change the subject. I tried everything to bond with them. I remembered birthdays with thoughtful gifts. I offered to help Eleanor with her charity committee. I listened to Amanda's endless stories about her glamorous PR job. Nothing penetrated the invisible wall they'd erected. James always had excuses for their behaviour. "Mom's just protective of our family dynamic," or "that's just how they are with everyone at first," or my personal favourite, "you're being too sensitive." When Eleanor announced she was planning her 60th birthday celebration in Paris, I saw it as an opportunity to finally connect. Paris was one of my favourite cities. I actually owned property there, though no one in James's family knew that. I spoke fluent French and knew the best hidden gems in the city. Maybe I could finally impress Eleanor with my knowledge. I offered to help with the planning, sending her information on exclusive restaurants and experiences that weren't in typical tourist guides. She thanked me curtly and said she had it covered. When I asked if she needed help finding a special birthday gift, James interrupted. "I've already got Mum's gift handled, babe. She's very particular." Despite these rebuffs, I remained optimistic as we packed for Paris. James and I would be staying at a boutique hotel I pretended to have found on a travel blog, though I actually owned a minority stake in the property. Eleanor, Richard, Amanda, and Amanda's husband, Todd, would be at a large chain hotel nearby, along with James's aunt, Susan, Uncle Robert, and grandmother Evelyn. The coldness began immediately upon arrival. We all met in the hotel lobby for a welcome dinner, and Eleanor announced, "I've made 2 reservations. The family will be at La Maison and Tiffany. I've got you a spot at the Darling Cafe next door. I know you prefer casual dining." I looked at James, waiting for him to object, but he just shrugged. "Mom's been planning this forever. It's easier to just go with it." I ended up dining alone while the family laughed and celebrated 20 feet away, separated by glass and years of calculated exclusion. When they finished, James came to collect me, oblivious to how humiliated I felt. "Did you enjoy your dinner?" he asked. "Mum was worried you might not like the fancy French food." I bit back my response. Eleanor knew perfectly well that I loved French cuisine. This was just another power play. Back at our hotel, I tried to explain to James how hurt I felt, but he dismissed my concerns again. "Tiffany, this is Mom's big birthday trip. Can you stop making everything about you for once? Just try harder to fit in with my family." I went to sleep that night, wondering when try harder would ever be enough. The morning of Eleanor's birthday arrived with bright Parisian sunshine streaming through our hotel windows. I woke up early, determined to make one last effort to connect with James's family. Today was the culmination of the trip, Eleanor's actual birthday, and surely they couldn't exclude me on such an important day. I rolled over to find James already dressed. "Where are you going so early?" I asked, sitting up. "Oh, Mum texted. The family's meeting for breakfast at some place she loves. I was trying not to wake you." My heart sank. "Were you going to tell me I'd love to join you?" James looked uncomfortable. "Well, it's just a quick family thing. Mum wants to reminisce about childhood birthdays and stuff." "James, I'm your wife. I am family." He sighed dramatically. "Fine, you can come, but please don't make a thing of it." I dressed quickly and followed him to a charming cafe several blocks away. When we arrived, the family was already seated at a round table with no empty chairs. Eleanor's face registered momentary annoyance before she smoothed it into a tight smile. "Tiffany, what a surprise. We thought you'd want to sleep in." "I wouldn't miss celebrating your birthday," I replied warmly, refusing to acknowledge the obvious exclusion. A waiter brought over an additional chair, wedging it awkwardly between James and his grandmother. As I sat down, Eleanor was already continuing a story about James's 5th birthday, pointedly not catching me up on the conversation. Throughout breakfast, they discussed family memories, rarely explaining the context or including me in the reminiscing. Whenever I asked a question or tried to join the conversation, someone would talk over me or change the subject. After breakfast, Eleanor announced, "Now we're going shopping for my birthday outfit. I need all hands on deck to find the perfect dress." Everyone stood to leave. I rose too, but Eleanor touched my arm. "Tiffany, dear, I know shopping isn't your thing. You're always so practical with your clothes. Why don't you explore on your own today? Perhaps visit some of those computer museums or whatever interests you." Before I could respond, James whispered, "Just give her this, okay? It's her birthday." I watched them walk away, a tight-knit group laughing together, while I stood alone on a Parisian street corner. The exclusion was so blatant it took my breath away. Rather than wander alone, I went back to our hotel and tried to process what was happening. Was I overreacting, as James constantly suggested? Was I somehow failing at being a daughter-in-law, despite my best efforts? That afternoon, I decided to visit a small cafe near our hotel to clear my head. As luck would have it, Eleanor and Amanda were at a table in the corner, shopping bags piled around them. They didn't see me, and I was about to approach them when I heard my name. "Honestly, I don't know what James sees in Tiffany," Eleanor was saying in French, unaware that I was fluent. "She's so plain and awkward, with no sense of style or family tradition." "She's probably after his trust fund," Amanda replied, also in French. "She claims to have some little tech business, but who knows if that's even true. She certainly doesn't dress like she has money." "Well, she's not good enough for him, that's clear," Eleanor continued. "She doesn't fit with our family at all. No breeding, no connections." "At least she won't be at the main table tonight," Amanda snickered. "That was genius, Mom." "I just want a proper family dinner with my family," Eleanor said emphatically. "Is that too much to ask on my birthday? I slipped out before they saw me, my cheeks burning with humiliation and anger. Their words confirmed what I'd suspected all along. I would never be accepted no matter what I did. Worse, they thought I was after James's money, which was laughable given my actual financial situation. Back in our room, I confronted James when he returned from shopping. Your mother and sister were speaking about me in French today. They don't think I'm good enough for you. James rolled his eyes. You don't speak French, Tiffany. You probably misunderstood. Je parle français couramment, I responded fluently. I understood every word. They think I'm after your money and that I don't belong in your family. James looked momentarily surprised at my French, but quickly recovered. You're being sensitive again. Mum's just protective and it's her birthday. Can you please stop making this trip difficult? Just try harder to fit in. There it was again. Try harder. As if I hadn't been trying for 2 years while they continuously moved the goalposts. Tonight is important to Mom, James continued. Just follow her lead at dinner and everything will be fine. I nodded silently, not wanting to fight. But inside, something had shifted. I was done trying to win approval from people who had decided to dislike me before they even knew me. I was done dimming my light to make others comfortable. That evening, I spent hours getting ready for the dinner, putting on a black cocktail dress that was elegant but still understated. I'd bought Eleanor a vintage Hermes scarf I'd found at a small boutique, knowing she collected them. I practiced a toast in my head, determined to be gracious despite everything. James barely looked at me as we walked to the restaurant, too busy texting his sister about last-minute details. When we arrived at Le Ciel de Paris, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city with a wait list months long, the maitre d' greeted Eleanor like royalty. Madame Williams, welcome. Your private dining room is ready. We followed him through the main dining area with its spectacular views of the Eiffel Tower to a secluded room with a large round table set for 8 people. 8, not 9. I stopped in the doorway counting again. Eleanor and Richard, Amanda and Todd, Susan and Robert, grandmother Evelyn, and James. 8 seats elegantly set with name cards. There was no place for me. James noticed my hesitation and glanced at the table. A smirk crossed his face before he could hide it. Guess we miscounted, he said with a shrug that communicated he knew exactly what was happening. Eleanor turned with fake concern. Oh dear, it seems there's been a mistake with the seating. I'm sure we can squeeze you in somewhere, Tiffany. The waiter looked uncomfortable. Madame, perhaps the lady would be comfortable at a small table just there. He pointed to a tiny table in the corner, clearly meant for service staff or coats. That would be perfect, Eleanor said before I could respond. I stood frozen as the family took their seats at the main table. James sat without a backward glance at me, immediately engaging his grandmother in conversation. A server brought a chair to the corner table and gave me a sympathetic look as I sat down, separated from the family dinner. For 30 excruciating minutes I sat alone while they laughed and talked, passing shared appetizers that never made it to my isolated corner. The waiter brought me a menu separately, as if I were dining alone, which effectively I was. I heard fragments of their conversation deliberately excluding me. At one point, Eleanor said loudly enough for me to hear, I just wanted a family dinner with my family on my birthday. Is that so much to ask? The others murmured in agreement, while James remained silent, neither defending me nor acknowledging the cruelty of the situation. In that moment, something inside me broke and reformed. I had spent 2 years shrinking myself to fit into their narrow definition of acceptable, hiding my success and my strength to make them comfortable. For what? To be seated at a reject table while my husband watched in complicit silence, I quietly stood up, gathering my purse and Eleanor's gift. No one noticed as I slipped out of the private dining room. Outside in the main restaurant, I approached the manager. Excuse me, I said in perfect French. I need to make an urgent call. Is there somewhere private I could speak? He led me to a small office where I pulled out my phone and called my assistant Lisa. Lisa, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. It's time for Plan B. Are you sure? She asked, concerned. Absolutely. Execute immediately. And Lisa, no half measures. As I hung up, I felt a weight lifting. No more hiding, no more trying to be small enough for people who would never accept me. It was time to show them exactly who they'd been dismissing all this time. As I stepped out of the restaurant into the cool Parisian evening, a strange calm settled over me. 2 years of trying to please the unpleasable were behind me. Now I would reclaim my power and my dignity, even if that meant revealing what I'd kept private for so long. I took a taxi back to our hotel, changed out of my cocktail dress into something more suitable for what was to come, and began making calls. First to Pascal, the owner of Le Ciel de Paris, who happened to be an old friend and business associate. "Pascal, I need a favor." I explained the situation briefly. "Say no more, Tiffany. Consider it done," he replied. "Though I must say I had no idea you were dining in my restaurant tonight under your married name." Within 15 minutes, Eleanor would receive an apologetic call from the restaurant manager, explaining that due to an unexpected gas leak, the entire restaurant needed to be evacuated immediately. No exceptions, not even for a birthday celebration. My next call was to Marie, my property manager in Paris. "Is the villa in Neuilly-sur-Seine available tonight?" "It's your villa, madame. It's always available for you," she replied. "Shall I have it prepared?" "Yes, immediately. I'll need full staff, the best chef you can find on short notice, florists, decorators. Everything for an elegant birthday dinner for 10 people within 3 hours. Price is no object." "Consider it done," Marie assured me. After ending the call, I made arrangements for transportation. My private helicopter would be standing by to bring me to the villa later. I also instructed my office to quietly reach out to Eleanor's friends in Paris, those she'd been name-dropping all week, inviting them to a surprise birthday celebration at my villa. These were people Eleanor had claimed to know, but likely only followed on social media. Influential Parisians who wouldn't recognize her name, but would definitely recognize mine. As I finished my preparations, my phone lit up with calls from James. I let them go to voicemail as I packed my bag, separating my belongings from his. By the time I left the hotel in a car I'd arranged, I had over 20 missed calls and a dozen increasingly panicked texts. "Restaurant evacuated. Where are you? Mum's birthday is ruined. We need help finding another place. All the good restaurants are booked. What do we do? Answer your phone." I smiled faintly at the irony. Now they wanted my help, my input, my presence. Only because they were in a crisis, not because they valued me. At precisely 9 o'clock, my car pulled up to the gates of my villa, a stunning 19th century mansion with modern renovations nestled in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Paris. In the 3 hours since my calls, Marie had worked miracles. The entrance was lined with elegant lanterns, the grand dining room transformed with flowers and candles, and the terrace overlooking the garden set for after-dinner drinks. A Michelin-starred chef and his team were preparing a magnificent meal in the kitchen. Servers in formal attire stood ready to attend to every need. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the salon. Everything was perfect. I checked my phone again. James had left increasingly desperate voicemails. "Every restaurant is either booked or mysteriously closed. What the hell is going on in this city tonight? Mum is crying, her big birthday dinner is ruined. If you're doing this somehow, it's not funny. Call me back." I texted him the address of the villa with simple instructions. "Bring everyone here at 10 p.m, black tie." Then I turned off my phone and went upstairs to get ready. From my luggage, I removed a dress I'd kept hidden. Not the modest cocktail wear I usually chose to downplay my status, but a stunning Dior gown in deep burgundy custom made for me during Paris Fashion Week last year. I arranged for my hair and makeup to be done by professionals who arrived discreetly at the back entrance. By 10 o'clock, I was transformed. No longer the meek daughter-in-law trying to fit in, but Tiffany Reynolds tech mogul and one of the wealthiest women under 40 in America. As the first cars carrying Eleanor's friends began to arrive, I positioned myself at the entrance to greet them. At precisely 10:15, a taxi pulled up carrying the Williams family, looking disheveled and frustrated after their ruined evening. I watched through the security camera as they approached the gate, confused by the grand mansion and the sounds of a party already in progress. When the gate opened automatically, they walked up the path with uncertainty. I stepped out to greet them, and the look on their faces as they registered both the magnificent surroundings and my transformed appearance was worth every penny this evening would cost. "Welcome to my home," I said with a warm smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Please come in. Eleanor's birthday celebration is just getting started." "Your home," James sputtered, his eyes darting between my face and the magnificent villa behind me. The rest of his family stood frozen mouths slightly agape as they took in the scene. The valet parking luxury cars, the sounds of classical music drifting from inside, the glimpses of well-dressed guests through the windows. "Yes, one of them anyway," I replied casually. "I've owned this property for about 5 years. Shall we go in? Your mother's guests are waiting." "My guests?" Eleanor managed to say, her voice faint. I don't understand. Oh, all those people you mentioned knowing in Paris. The Duprees, Madame Belfort, the Richelieus, they were delighted to receive an invitation to celebrate with you. Come, let me introduce you. I turned and walked into the villa without waiting for their response. After a moment of stunned silence, they followed me like dazed ducklings. Inside, the transformation was complete. The grand salon glowed with soft lighting, highlighting priceless artwork on the walls. Pieces I'd collected over the years from emerging artists who had since become renowned. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes. The string quartet played a delicate Debussy piece. And mingling throughout were about 30 elegantly dressed Parisians, influential people who knew exactly who I was, though they'd never met Eleanor before tonight. Tiffany, called out Philippe Dupree, a prominent gallery owner, approaching with kisses to both cheeks. What a delightful surprise to get your invitation, and this must be your mother-in-law, enchanted madame. He took Eleanor's limp hand and kissed it while she stammered incoherently. Similar scenes played out as I guided the shell-shocked family through the room. Person after person greeted me with familiar warmth and respect, then turned polite but curious attention to Eleanor, clearly having no idea who she was, despite her previous claims of connection to their social circles. What is happening? James hissed, grabbing my elbow as we moved toward the dining room. What is all this? This is who I really am, I replied, simply removing his hand from my arm. The person I've always been beneath the modest clothes and the accommodating silence. You've been lying to me for our entire relationship. I raised an eyebrow. I never lied. I simply didn't volunteer information to people who never bothered to truly know me. Your family made assumptions, and I let them. Before he could respond, I turned to address the gathered guests. If I could have everyone's attention, please. It's time for us to move into the dining room to celebrate Eleanor's 60th birthday with a special meal prepared by Chef Antoine Bélanger. There were appreciative murmurs at the mention of the famous chef, someone Eleanor had name-dropped repeatedly during the trip, but had likely never met. Her face was a study in conflicting emotions as she was ushered to the head of the exquisitely decorated table. I had arranged the seating strategically. Eleanor at the head, surrounded by influential strangers rather than her family. James seated far from me next to an elderly art patron who was notoriously long-winded. Amanda beside a fashion editor who would immediately recognize her knockoff handbag. For myself, I took a power position at the opposite end of the table, with the French finance minister's wife on one side and a tech investor on the other, both personal friends who were already engaging me in conversation about my latest business ventures. As the first course was served, I could see James staring at me from across the table, his expression vacillating between shock, anger, and a dawning realization that he'd severely underestimated the woman he'd married. Throughout the meal, I was the perfect hostess. Attentive, charming, and completely in control. I made sure Eleanor received birthday toasts from every guest, though the well-wishes were perfunctory from people who'd just met her. I ensured the conversation flowed smoothly, switching between English and French, demonstrating a cultural fluency that clearly surprised my in-laws. By dessert, the dynamics had completely shifted. Eleanor, normally so confident and commanding, sat small and uncertain in her chair. Amanda had abandoned any pretense of superiority and was sneaking glances at my jewelry and the original Monet visible in the adjacent room. Richard and the others simply looked overwhelmed. James alternated between attempts to join high-level conversations where he was out of his depth and staring at me with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. When the meal concluded, I stood to make a toast, raising my crystal champagne flute. To Eleanor on her 60th birthday, I said warmly, as if the earlier restaurant incident had never happened. May this milestone be remembered for years to come. The subtext was clear to the family, though the other guests smiled and clinked glasses obliviously. I then presented Eleanor with her gift. Not just the Hermes scarf I'd originally purchased, but a document revealing a substantial donation to her favourite Paris opera house, in her name, guaranteeing her a permanent acknowledgement in their benefactor's hall. It was the kind of gift only serious money could provide, and Eleanor's hands trembled as she accepted it. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to meet my eyes. As the guests moved to the terrace for after-dinner drinks, I signalled to Marie that the helicopter should be prepared. It was time for the final act of the evening. James cornered me near the grand staircase, his face flushed with confusion and the expensive wine he'd been drinking too quickly. "We need to talk," he said urgently. "What is all this? Who are you really?" "You're right," I replied calmly. "We do need to talk. But not here, not now. I'll meet you back at the hotel in an hour. The hotel? But aren't we staying here now that I know about this? He gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings. No, James. You're going back to the hotel. I have other plans. Before he could protest, I stepped onto the terrace to bid my guests good night, explaining that a business matter required my attention. Then, as the Williams family watched in stunned silence, I walked to the helipad at the edge of the property, where my private helicopter waited its blades already beginning to turn. Without looking back, I climbed aboard, leaving them to find their own way back to their hotel, surrounded by strangers, in a city where suddenly I was the one with all the power and connection. As the helicopter lifted off, I caught a final glimpse of James standing on the terrace, looking small and insignificant below. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The helicopter carried me not to another Paris location, but to Le Bourget airport, where my private jet waited. I wasn't running away. This was a strategic retreat to gather my thoughts and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. I instructed the pilot to fly me to my property in the south of France, just an hour away, where I could spend the night in peace. During the flight, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately exploded with notifications, dozens of missed calls and texts from James, each more desperate than the last. Where are you going? We need to talk now. You can't just drop a bomb like this and disappear. I'm coming to the hotel. We have to figure this out. The last message had been sent just 20 minutes ago. James would arrive at the hotel soon, only to find my things gone and no trace of me. I felt a momentary twinge of guilt, quickly replaced by resolve. After 2 years of emotional manipulation and tonight's public humiliation, I owed him nothing, certainly not an immediate explanation. I sent him a single text. I'll meet you at your hotel tomorrow at noon, room 542. Then I silenced my phone again and gazed out the window at the glittering French countryside below. For the first time in years, I felt completely myself. Not the watered-down version I'd created to make James and his family comfortable, but the confident, successful woman I'd always been. The next morning, after a restful night in my coastal villa, I returned to Paris. I checked into a different 5-star hotel under my own name, dressed in a simple but expensive suit, and arrived at James's hotel precisely at noon. When he opened the door, he looked terrible, unshaven eyes red-rimmed, still wearing last night's rumpled clothes. The room behind him was a disaster, with room service trays and minibar bottles scattered about. You came, he said, sounding genuinely surprised. I said I would. I walked past him into the room, maintaining professional distance. Shall we talk? Talk. His voice rose sharply. You've been living a double life for our entire relationship. You humiliated my mother on her birthday. You made us look like fools in front of half of Paris. And now you want to talk. I remained perfectly calm. Your mother planned to humiliate me by excluding me from her birthday dinner. Your entire family has been excluding and belittling me for 2 years. You stood by and let it happen, even encouraged it. So yes, now I want to talk. He ran his hands through his disheveled hair. I don't even know who you are. That's precisely the problem, James. You never bothered to find out. I sat down in the single armchair, crossing my legs. Let me tell you now, my name is Tiffany Reynolds. I founded Secure Core Technologies 8 years ago. We revolutionized cybersecurity protocols for financial institutions and were acquired by a major tech firm 3 years ago, though I maintained controlling interest. I'm worth approximately $2.7 billion. I speak 4 languages. I own property in 7 countries. And I've been hiding all of this because I wanted to be loved for myself, not my money. James stared at me, mouth agape. 2.7 billion, he finally whispered. Of course, that was the part he focused on. Not the years of hard work, not the accomplishments, just the number. Yes, I confirmed. Which makes it particularly ironic that your mother and sister believed I was after your family money. I heard them discussing it in French, remember? They said I wasn't good enough for you, that I had no breeding, no connections. James had the grace to look ashamed. They were just protective. No, they were elitist and cruel, and you enabled them. I leaned forward. Tell me honestly, James, did you know they planned to exclude me from the table last night? He couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. I suspected, he finally admitted. Mom said she wanted just family for the actual birthday dinner, and I didn't want to upset her. So you chose to upset your wife instead, to publicly humiliate me. You turned around and did the same thing, he countered. You made my mother look like a fool in front of all those fancy people. The difference is that I didn't set out to hurt anyone. I created a beautiful evening for her birthday after her original plans fell through. I gave her an incredible gift. I introduced her to people she's only dreamed of meeting. The fact that it also revealed my true financial status was secondary. Secondary, he scoffed. You arrived in a designer gown and left in a helicopter that was all about showing off. It was about reclaiming my dignity, I corrected him. For 2 years, I've dimmed my light to make you and your family comfortable. I've hidden my success, my connections, my properties, my actual interests, all so you wouldn't feel intimidated and your family wouldn't judge me for having money, but not their kind of pedigree. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Paris rooftops. Last night, when I saw there was no place for me at that table, something broke inside me. I realized I'd been trying to earn love and acceptance from people who had decided to reject me before they even knew me. And worse, my husband, the person who should have been my strongest advocate, was complicit in my exclusion. James was quiet for a long moment. I didn't realize how it looked, he finally said. I just wanted everyone to get along. No. I turned to face him. You wanted me to keep accepting mistreatment to avoid rocking the boat. That's not the same thing. I returned to sit across from him. I have evidence of every slight, every exclusion over the past 2 years. I pulled out my phone and showed him a folder of screenshots. Text conversations, email invitations that deliberately omitted me social media posts showing family gatherings I'd never been told about. This wasn't in my head, James. This was a pattern and you were part of it. He scrolled through the evidence, his expression growing increasingly uncomfortable. I didn't realize it was so consistent, he admitted. But Tiffany, we can fix this. Now that they know who you really are, everything will be different. And there it was, the crux of the problem. That's exactly why we can't fix this, I said quietly. Because you think things should change now that you know I'm wealthy. But they should have been different simply because I'm your wife and deserved basic respect. I stood up again, signaling that the conversation was nearly over. I came here today to tell you I've contacted my lawyer. Divorce papers will be delivered tomorrow. Given our prenuptial agreement and the fact that I've kept my assets separate, this should be straightforward. Prenup? He looked confused. We don't have a prenup. We do, I corrected him. It was in the stack of documents you signed before the wedding. The agreement protects both of us. You keep everything in your name, I keep everything in mine. His face reddened with anger and embarrassment. You tricked me. I protected myself, I countered, and clearly I was right to do so. He stood to, desperation replacing anger. Tiffany, please. We can work this out. I love you. Do you, I asked simply, or do you love the idea of being married to a billionaire? That's not fair, he protested. What's not fair is being seated at a separate table from my husband at a family dinner. What's not fair is being consistently excluded and undermined for 2 years. What's not fair is having a partner who prioritizes his mother's comfort over his wife's dignity. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. I promised Eleanor a birthday celebration, and I delivered. The dinner at my villa is still happening tonight. I've arranged for a car to take your family there at 8. I won't be attending, but my staff will ensure everything is perfect. Consider it my parting gift. You're still hosting her birthday. Why? James looked genuinely confused. Because I made a commitment, and unlike some people, I keep my word, I replied. Also, I suspect your mother will want to show off her new connection to her actual friends now that she knows who I really am. I'm giving her the opportunity to save face. His expression confirmed my suspicion. Eleanor would absolutely pivot from excluding me to bragging about me once she realized my true status. Goodbye, James, I said, opening the door. For what it's worth, I did love you. I just wish you'd loved me enough to stand by me when it mattered. As I walked down the hallway toward the elevator, I heard him call after me, but I didn't turn around. Some chapters need a definitive ending, and this one had been closed the moment I'd seen that table set for 8 instead of 9. The final confrontation with James's family happened that evening, though not as I had originally planned. After leaving James at his hotel, I returned to my own suite and was surprised by a call from the front desk informing me that Eleanor Williams was in the lobby insisting on seeing me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her in the hotel's private lounge. When I arrived, Eleanor sat stiffly on a velvet settee, looking simultaneously intimidated by the luxurious surroundings and determined to maintain her dignity. Tiffany, she acknowledged me with a tight nod. Thank you for seeing me. Of course, I replied, taking the seat across from her. What can I do for you, Eleanor? She clasped and unclasped her hands nervously. James told me you're planning to divorce him. Yes, I confirmed without elaboration. I see. She took a deep breath. I thought perhaps we could clear the air. Last night was quite a revelation. I imagine it was, I said mildly. Why didn't you tell us who you really were? She demanded, a hint of her usual imperious tone returning. All this time we thought you were just a regular person. I am a regular person, I replied. My bank account doesn't change that, and I didn't tell you because I wanted to be accepted for who I am, not what I own. But you deliberately misled us, she protested. Did I, or did you simply make assumptions because I didn't arrive with a list of accomplishments and properties? The information was all publicly available, Eleanor. A simple Google search would have told you everything about my company and success. She had the grace to look embarrassed. Well, we don't typically research family members. No, you just exclude them from birthday dinners, I replied with a pointed look. Eleanor's face flushed. About that, there was a misunderstanding with the reservation. Please don't insult my intelligence, I said calmly. There was no misunderstanding. You deliberately arranged for a table that excluded me, and James knew about it. I heard you and Amanda discussing your plans in French, remember? She fell silent, caught in the lie. I want to be clear, I continued. I'm not divorcing James because of last night. I'm divorcing him because for 2 years he's allowed and enabled your systematic exclusion and belittling of me. Last night was simply the final confirmation that this pattern will never change. People can change, Eleanor said, suddenly conciliatory. Now that we understand your position, things would be different. I raised an eyebrow. My position? You mean now that you know I'm wealthy? That's exactly the problem, Eleanor. You're suggesting you would treat me with respect now because of my money, when you should have treated me with respect simply because I'm a human being and your son's chosen partner. She didn't have an answer for that. The dinner at my villa is still happening tonight, I said, changing the subject. My staff will ensure everything is perfect. Consider it a parting gift. You won't be there, she asked, sounding surprised and perhaps a little disappointed. Now that she knew my social standing, she was likely eager to be seen with me. No, my jet is leaving for New York in 2 hours. I have business to attend to. Eleanor hesitated, then asked in a small voice, what about the Opera House donation, in my name? Of course, that would be her concern, ensuring she maintained the social capital my gift had provided. It's done, I assured her. Your name will be on the benefactor's wall, as promised. I don't rescind gifts once given. Relief washed over her face quickly, followed by a calculating look. Perhaps we could stay in touch. I have several charity initiatives that could benefit from someone with your resources. And there it was. The pivot from excluding me to attempting to use me all within 24 hours. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Once the divorce is finalized, we'll have no reason for further contact. I wish you a happy birthday, Eleanor, and a pleasant remainder of your trip. I walked away without waiting for her response, feeling lighter with each step. The confrontation I'd dreaded had been surprisingly easy, perhaps because I was no longer seeking her approval or acceptance. 2 hours later, my jet took off from Paris, carrying me away from 2 years of diminishing myself to please people who had never intended to accept me. As the city of light receded beneath the clouds, I felt not sadness, but relief, like removing a too tight garment and finally being able to breathe deeply again. 1 year later, I'm sitting on the terrace of my beach house in Malibu, watching the waves crash against the shore as the sun sets in a blaze of orange and pink. My laptop is open beside me, displaying the quarterly report for my company's newest security protocol, a breakthrough that's already being implemented by major banks worldwide. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago, quicker and cleaner than most thanks to the prenuptial agreement James had unknowingly signed. He fought it briefly, hiring lawyers to challenge the validity of the document, but ultimately gave up when it became clear the agreement was ironclad. The aftermath of Paris was both painful and freeing. Painful because despite everything, I had loved James, or at least the person I thought he was. Freeing because I no longer had to hide my success or dim my light to make others comfortable. Eleanor made several attempts to maintain contact, suddenly interested in developing a mother-daughter relationship now that she understood my financial status. I declined politely but firmly each time. Amanda reached out on social media, commenting on posts about my business achievements with false warmth, tagging mutual acquaintances in transparent attempts to leverage our connection. I quietly restricted her access without confrontation. James cycled through anger bargaining and finally pathetic attempts to reconcile. "I've changed," he claimed in emails I rarely answered. "I understand now what I did wrong." But his apologies always circled back to what he had lost: my wealth, my connections, my status, rather than acknowledging the deeper betrayal of failing to stand by me when it mattered. The hardest part wasn't the divorce itself, but confronting the red flags I'd ignored throughout our relationship. How James had subtly discouraged me from talking about my business successes, changing the subject whenever I mentioned a professional achievement. How he'd claimed to love my modesty while actively suppressing my natural confidence. How he'd positioned himself as my protector against his family's criticism while actually enabling it. I spent months in therapy unpacking why I'd allowed myself to be diminished for so long. My therapist helped me recognize that in my desire to be loved for myself rather than my money, I'd created a false dichotomy, believing I had to hide my success to find authentic connection rather than understanding that the right partner would celebrate both who I am and what I've accomplished. Slowly, I reclaimed parts of myself I'd suppressed. I reconnected with old friends I'd drifted away from during my marriage. Successful, powerful women who understood the unique challenges of navigating relationships amid significant wealth. I refocused on my business, leading a major expansion into international markets. I started mentoring young female entrepreneurs, sharing not just business advice, but personal lessons about maintaining authenticity and self-respect. And gradually the pain faded, replaced by wisdom and a fierce commitment to never again compromise my dignity for approval. 6 months ago, I met someone new, a neurosurgeon named David, who runs a non-profit bringing medical care to underserved communities. We met at a fundraiser where I was a major donor, but he was the keynote speaker, passionate about his work rather than impressed by my checkbook. Our relationship is still new, but fundamentally different from what I had with James. David knows exactly who I am, all aspects of me, and celebrates rather than diminishes my success. The most profound lesson from my failed marriage wasn't about money or status. It was about self-respect and boundaries. I learned that walking away from people who don't value you isn't failure. It's self-preservation. I learned that authentic love doesn't require you to make yourself smaller. And I learned that sometimes standing alone is better than standing with people who undermine your worth. That birthday dinner in Paris was painful and humiliating, but it was also the catalyst for reclaiming my authentic self. When I walked out of that restaurant, I wasn't just leaving a bad situation. I was walking toward a fuller, more honest life. So if you're shrinking yourself to make someone else comfortable, if you're constantly trying to earn love that should be freely given, if you're the one always accommodating while receiving little in return, please know that you deserve more. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Expecting respect isn't unreasonable. And walking away from people who consistently devalue you isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. What's your story of standing up for yourself when others tried to diminish you? Have you ever had to walk away from toxic relationships? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to say goodbye to those who don't recognize your worth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to honor your own.